Hey guys, this is Scott with Coffee with Scott. We've not done a video in a little while, and I was asked a question on Facebook the other day and wanted to kind of address the question, and it was a good question, and I want to give my answer here, as I said, and hoping that who asked the question will watch the video. I'm pretty sure he'll watch the video. He is a subscriber to this channel. But he asked the question of my thoughts on the use of servant in Acts chapter 3 and verse 13. And I want to read this verse, of course, to give a little background. You got Peter and John who are going to the temple for the time of prayer. They encounter a lame man sitting at the gate. Peter says, "Silver and gold have I none, such as I have give I thee. In the name of Yeshua of Nazareth, rise up and walk." The man feels the strength in his feet, his legs, his knees, his ankles, and begins to leap. He goes into the temple area with them, and people are in awe of seeing this man. And in verse 11, let's pick up there. "And as the lame man which was healed Peter and John, all the people ran and gathered to them in the porch that is called Solomon's, greatly wondering. And when Peter saw it, he answered unto the people, Ye men of Israel, why marvel ye at this? Or why look ye so earnestly on us, as though by our own power or holiness we had made this man to walk? And then Peter says this in verse 13, "The God of Abraham and of Isaac and of Jacob, the God of our fathers, hath glorified," and the King James is going to say, "Son, Jesus, whom ye delivered up and denied him in the presence of Pilate, when he was determined to let him go." Now the King James says son, but the majority of other versions of the Bible are going to say servant in this place of saying son. And there are those that would see this and use this to support a false doctrine that Jesus was just simply a man, that he was the physical son of Joseph, and there was no divinity about him, that came later. And of course this is a false doctrine. But what I want to do is look at why this word servant is more fitting in what Peter is saying than the word son. We're going to start with the word that is used and translated as son in the King James. It means servant. It means child. It could be a boy, or it could be a girl. It can speak of a king's attendant or a king's minister. But also with the use of this word comes along with it the idea of some type of punishment. And so I want us to look at this aspect of that. So, like I said, these other versions use this servant instead of son. But if you look at Philippians 2 and 7, this is what Philippians says in verse 7, "But made himself," speaking of Jesus, "of no reputation, and took upon himself the form of a servant, and was made into the likeness of man." So here we see here the word translated servant, and this word that is used in Philippians means servant. It does not mean son, doesn't mean boy, doesn't mean girl, doesn't mean minister. It means servant. It is a word that is used as for a bond slave, someone that is put into servitude, either voluntarily or involuntarily. This word servant is used 125 times in the New Testament, where the word in Acts 3 and 13 is only used 24 times in the New Testament. And I will say this, there is in the Greek a word for son, and it is used in reference to Son of God, Son of David, Son. And it means son, where the word that Peter uses can mean son, but I don't think that's what Peter was intending for the word to mean. As I said, this word is used when it speaks of a servant, but there is some punishment behind this word. And so I feel that Peter, when he uses this particular Greek word in reference to Jesus with these people at the temple, he's trying to get a message across, and we're going to see that he is actually drawing their attention to some other scriptures by using this word that he uses, that more times than not is speaking of a servant. If we go to Isaiah 42 and 1, Isaiah 42 and 1, speaking of the coming of Yeshua, he says, "Behold my servant whom I uphold, mine elect, in whom my soul delighteth. I have put my spirit upon him, and he shall bring forth judgment to the Gentiles." If we look at the Septuagint and read Isaiah 42 and 1, it does contain this word servant, and it is the same Greek word that Peter that Peter uses in Acts 3 and 13. But let's go back to Acts real quick. And go back to this reason that he uses this word in Acts 3 and 13 for that the majority of translations, I'll get my thoughts here together, the majority of translations translate as servant. Let's go to Isaiah 53, which is known as the suffering servant. And we're all familiar with this. You can read it, but it talks about him being despised, rejected, beaten, smitten, taking on our griefs, our sorrows. So what Peter is doing, let me wrap this up. What Peter is doing in Acts 3 is he is drawing the crowd's attention to who Yeshua was, and what his purpose was. He's pointing to him, pointing them back to Isaiah 53. He's pointing them back to Isaiah 42. So he's not necessarily saying that he was the Son of God, but saying that he is God. This one that Isaiah wrote about, that talked about is the one that you delivered up to Pilate. But if we look at other translations, you'll see that some of them use the word child in Acts 13, which also is going to play into Peter pointing out who Yeshua was. The literal translation says his child when it's speaking of Yeshua in Acts 3. So when we go with this word child, go to Isaiah 9 and 6, if you look in the Septuagint, it is the same Greek word that is used in Acts 3. And he says, for unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulders, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. If you look at Young's literal translation in Acts 13, it says his child. If you look at the majority text of Acts 13, it says his servant. So what am I saying? How do I guess, let me say that, what do I think about? Let me go back to the original question. What do I think about the use and other versions of Acts 3 and 13 where they use servant instead of son? I think those other versions are more correct when it comes to this scripture, this verse, than what the King James is when the King James uses son. Because I want you to keep in mind, Peter is not trying to show or tell them that Jesus was the Son of God. He is trying to tell them that Jesus was God manifested in the flesh, that he is the God, the Messiah that Isaiah was writing about when he talks about the suffering servant, when he talks about his elect, when he talks about the child. Because all of these verses, excluding the suffering servant chapter of Isaiah 53, but the other scriptures we've looked at use that same word when it talks about the servant, when it talks about child.